I want to thank Andrew for going before me because I don't have any data, but he has me covered. I'd also like to say I think the first three presenters were amazing, and the big difference between them and me is that I think the Citizens Advisory Committee is a all-volunteer. So we are an 11-member body, the Midmarket Citizens Advisory Committee. I'm in the seat representing labor, one of the two seats representing labor, and I was the chair of the committee for summer of 2013 to this summer when I relinquished that and let someone else take that on. And I'm not here officially representing the Citizens Advisory Committee, but as someone who's served on it for 2 years and has spent nearly a decade working on mid-market issues. So I think the first question is, what is the Mid-Market Citizens Advisory Committee? Raise your hand if you have heard of the Central Market Tenderloin Payroll Tax Exclusion Zone. Okay, raise your hand if you've heard of the Twitter tax break. All right, same exact thing. Mid-market payroll tax exclusion zone doesn't fit well into the Chronicle. It's not a good headline. So in 2010, this payroll tax exclusion zone was created. The idea being is that tech companies coming in, any company basically, coming into a pre-designated zone would have any increases to their payroll tax over that course of those years forgiven, okay, and not charged. So the idea is if you're a small company, a small startup with like 10 people, but you project over the next 5 years to grow to 300 people, you move to this area and you're not going to get dinged on any of that payroll increase, right? So the idea is that in order to do this, we need to, so they created in this legislation a Citizens Advisory Committee whose purpose is to make recommendations to the city and the Board of Supervisors and the city administrator on policies and programs to mitigate the effects of this coming in and to review the community benefits agreement. Who here knows what a community benefits agreement is? Okay, so we got a lot of work to do. So I think the important thing to do is to separate what we have here from what a traditional community benefits agreement is. A traditional community benefits agreement is between the community and the developer when the project is announced, but before the project gets government approval. And the idea of a community benefits agreement is to mitigate the negative impacts of a project coming into a town and to harness some of the benefits of that project for the people who already live in that community, okay? So usually the way it works is the community can hold up the project. They can get politicians to not support it. They can file lawsuits. They can have rallies, marches, strikes, protests, pickets, bad articles in the press, anything. And that's their leverage to extract concessions and to get a deal with the developer who wants this project to go forward. So what we have here in San Francisco is not exactly a CBA because the deal was already struck. This deal was originated with Mayor Gavin Newsom and then was sort of carried by Mayor Ed Lee. The deal was already struck, the contract was already signed, and then on the back end, they decided to do these CBAs, which don't have that same leverage because the die has been cast, the deal's already been made. So I think that's the way that we need to think about this, right, is when we talk about the community, the Twitter tax break, what are the negative impacts of these tech companies moving into the Tenderloin and mid-market area? That's one question. And the other question is, what is the benefits that can be harnessed? And I'm a big fan of analogies. So here's one. Let's say that you have a really, really nice backyard at your house, and your buddy wants to throw a barbecue back there. Before you let your friend have the barbecue back there, you're going to enter into some sort of an informal agreement with him, right? One is, I get some beer and I get some ribs. You're not going to come have a barbecue and not let me have any of that. And two is, you got to clean up your own mess. You got to keep the noise down after 10, right? So on the one hand, you're getting the benefits, the beer and the ribs. On the other hand, you're mitigating the negative impacts, which is the mess they're going to make and annoying your neighbors by playing loud music till midnight, okay? So when we think about this neighborhood, what are the issues what are the negative things that this development, revitalization, gentrification, whatever you want to call it, in mid-market has created, and what are the benefits that can be harnessed, okay? So I see two main negative impacts that we want to mitigate, and then one thing that we can harness. The two things we want to mitigate is, one is the cost of housing. Anyone living here knows the cost of housing has gotten outrageous, okay? So what can be done to address housing costs? One, I think, is strengthen eviction protections, affordable low-income housing development, housing bonds, impact fees to developers, and preserving the existing housing stock, which is regulation of things like Airbnb that are contracting the rental market, and also maintenance of rent control policies and upgrades to housing, making sure that the housing that does exist is habitable and is being used and maximized, right? I think we've recently passed some things about changing some laws around how you can bring other people into your housing. Another thing is business rent and nonprofit rent, right? They don't have any rent control. So what happens is the housing is protected, but a lot of the nonprofits that are in the mid-market area, they don't have any protection. So if the people who need the services have a right to stay here, but the nonprofit that provides those services for them is kicked out, that exacerbates every other problem in the neighborhood, okay? All of a sudden, someone's no longer seeing their social worker, no longer seeing their case manager, no longer getting the treatments that they need. And for businesses, the same thing. If a cafe that used to serve cheap food gets priced out and some place that's charging you $4 for a cup of coffee comes in, it once again hurts the community. And the way that we can resolve this is with jobs. I think it's important to note that a lot of the people in this mid-market community, they're not going to become coders. That ship has sailed. They're middle-aged. They don't have the skills. They don't have the education. So for a lot of those jobs, it's not going to happen. But there is a whole other world of jobs. There's janitorial, catering, security, maintenance, and we need to make sure that these are good, honest, well-paying jobs for people, right? And that's the real important thing that I want to talk about is these jobs have the ability to be middle-class jobs. And a lot of these are contracted out. And it's important that we make sure that those jobs, and that's where these companies can step in and can really help make sure that those jobs are benefiting the community and are not creating a cycle of poverty, but are allowing people to lift out. Okay? Thank you.